Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Kim Pate, the Vice President for External Relations here at CFED, and I'm going to be your moderator for the day. The purpose of this webinar, Applying Behavioral Economics for Improved Program Delivery and Greater Impact, is really to look at tax time as a unique opportunity during the year to help low-income clients bring in much-needed cash. The level of tax preparedness can have significant effects on the amount of a client's refund, and a temporary increase in cash flow from a tax refund presents opportunities for low-income self-employed clients to contribute to their savings or invest in their businesses. Behavioral economics can provide insight into how well-timed reminders and detailed implementation planning can help clients take advantage of full tax preparation and assistance programs. We would like to thank NeighborWorks America for their support for this webinar. And now I'm going to go through a few housekeeping points. This webinar is being recorded. The webinar recording and PowerPoint presentation will be available from CFED's and NeighborWorks America's websites. All webinar attendees are muted to ensure sound quality. And if you experience trouble dialing in, you can listen to the webinar by connecting speakers or a headset to your computer. You may also experience a relatively short lag between the changing of each presentation slide as the speakers are speaking. This is normal, and we ask for your patience, although we don't expect this to be a problem. We will address all questions during the Q&A session at the end of the presentations. And you can submit your questions at any time during the webinar. If you have any technical difficulties, we also have tech staff on board to help with that, so feel free to submit any questions about that as well. So at the end of the webinar, at the end of the presentations, there will be a Q&A session. And just to reiterate, to ask a question, click on Questions in the GoToWebinar control panel and type your question in the text box. And here we have a visual presentation, so that's very clear. And you can submit questions at any time during the webinar. So I am your moderator, as I mentioned, and we also have two fabulous presenters today. Mindy Hernandez, who is the founder and principal researcher for One Decision, which was a 2009 CFED Innovator in Residence. During her innovation year, Mindy worked with foundation communities in Austin, Texas, and in Philadelphia to design, implement, and measure the effects of behavioral economics interventions for programs serving self-employed clients at tax time. Behavioral economics is a topic that has been increasing in popularity in recent years. Mindy presented during a recent CFED webinar on how applying behavioral strategies can help improve the effectiveness of IDA programs, individual development account programs. And we thank Mindy for sharing information from her research on behavioral economics through our webinars. Linda Paulson, our second presenter, is the Tax Services Manager for Foundation Communities. She manages a network of tax preparation centers that comprise Foundation Communities' Community Tax Centers program. She played a lead role in the implementation of and data tracking for the behavioral economics interventions. Foundation Communities is a former grantee of CFED's Self-Employment Tax Initiative, or SETI, which tested the idea of providing both tax preparation and business development services for entrepreneurs. So with that, I will turn it over to Mindy. Next slide.
Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me. If not, just send me a chat. And I want to start by saying that I am really excited to speak with you guys today. Behavioral economics is an area where the application is just blowing up, and there's so much that can be done. A lot of this has been applied to asset building, but not all of it. And so there's lots of fertile ground. So to begin, what is behavioral economics and why are people excited about it? behavioral economics is a term that's been used a lot recently and used a lot recently. So the Obama administration used behavioral economics to design parts of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and Obama has used it for everything from designing the way safety labels are presented to designing parts of the recent healthcare bill. He even put, and this is really exciting to people like me, he even put a very well-known behavioral economist as head of the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, Cass Sunstein. And so what is the big deal? Why are policymakers like the Obama administration getting so excited about behavioral economics? Very simply, most fundamentally, it's a different way to think about social problems and people and the solutions to those social problems. Lots of programs and policies are built on assumptions about how people behave. And then they try to change behavior based on those assumptions. So behavioral economics says, well, what if those assumptions are totally wrong? What if, in fact, there are totally different and more effective ways of changing behavior? And this is especially important for the people on this call because the success of any anti-poverty program depends in a large part on changing behavior. Whether you're trying to get people to save or to make IDA deposits or to finish college or to attend training classes, you're fundamentally trying to change behavior. And in that way, you're like these policymakers that see behavioral economics as a different way to think about their problems. So whether you know it or not, you are all what is termed a choice architect because you design structures and contexts and programs where people make really consequential decisions. And behavioral economics can help you do that better. So as I go through this presentation, I want you to do the following mental exercise. Think about a challenge in your program in your head, that the crux of which is behavior. And another way I ask this question is, if you had a magic wand, what is the one or two behaviors that is most important for you to change to make your clients successful? And as I go through this presentation, think about what might be applicable to you and your program in changing that behavior. Okay, so let's begin with this first Economics 101 slide. And this is a cost-demand curve. And economists love to talk about cost and demand. And so, elegantly simple, right? So you have cost on the left. As cost goes up, demand goes down. It's all very simple, and cost is always in terms of dollars. What behavioral economics asks next is, what if cost, in fact, was more than dollars? What if there are psychological costs, like hassle or embarrassment, that significantly impacted demand? And so what we're trying to do, what I tried to do during my innovation year, was to tweak this demand curve by changing the way hassle and embarrassment was presented in different programs. Next slide. So let's look at a model of what this would look like. This is demand for a new savings product I'm calling Super Save. And we're no longer thinking about dollars here. We're thinking about hassle. And there's a lot of hassle to sign up for the Super Save product. You don't really know where to get it. You don't really know how much you can put in. It's just a hassle to sign up for and use, and it's unclear. So there's lots of hassle. So 50 people sign up. Next slide. So what we do is we put in a psychological subsidy, right? Policymakers usually think about a monetary subsidy. Let's make it cheaper to change demand. But here, we're thinking about a psychological subsidy. We're just going to make it easier. The cost is going to remain exactly the same. And what we see in the model is that now lots of people are taking it up. So again, this is a simple model. The question is, how is this applicable to real life? Next slide. This is actually what D2D did with their tax time savings bonds. That's exactly what they did. They didn't, in New York City, they offered people like a 1-to-1 match or a 3-to-1 match if people saved at tax time. This did nothing of the sort. It offered no monetary benefit. It was the exact same savings bonds. And they thought, big increase because what they did is they made it much easier to buy those savings bonds. Because when people came in to do their taxes and they sat next to their tax preparer said, hey, do you want a savings bond? All we have to do is check this box. And that made it much easier. The other thing they did is they timed it exactly right, because they had low-income people who usually didn't have a lot of money all of a sudden got their refunds back and had some cash at hand. And it was at that point that they asked, would you like to save in this very easy way? And they saw significant take-up. Next slide. Okay. So these different models come from different viewpoints of the way you see the world. And so the traditional economic model says that we're rational agents, we're well-informed, we have stable preferences. We look a lot like this guy. And so if we look like Spock, we don't need a lot of help, right? We're not that impacted by hassles because we're going to perfectly calculate what's in our best interest. Next slide. Behavioral economics says, well, that doesn't sound like me, and that doesn't sound like anybody I know. That doesn't sound like a realistic model of human behavior. In fact, don't people have mediocre judgment? Don't their preferences change? They make mistakes calculating risk. They're impulsive. They, in fact, are hugely impacted by hassle. They look a lot more like this guy. Next slide. And I like this quote a lot, which I'll read. Son, if you really want something in this life, you have to work for it. Now, quiet. They're about to announce the lottery numbers. Because what we see here is Homer's being very human, like all of us. And he's also being totally inconsistent, right? He's saying you have to work for something, but then he's looking forward to the lottery. And that's the trouble, is that we are all inconsistent and we don't realize it just the way Homer doesn't realize it. And even as program designers and policymakers, we don't take account of our inconsistency. And so we design programs and policies that don't take account of it. This is also an interesting quote because if anyone's familiar with D2D's price-linked savings work, they have used the attraction of the lottery to significantly increase people's savings. Next slide. So in my innovation year, I worked with CFED to basically take these insights and these ideas and apply them to real programs and real policies, real problems. And so the way that I did this is I connected with great partners. And the first thing that I think any program has to do before they think about applying some of these ideas is think about their capacity, because you really have to be high capacity to take something new on. Then we targeted the highest value challenges. So that gets to this question of, if you had a magic wand, what is the behavioral problem that would yield the biggest solutions, the most change? Then we understand the context. It's really important when you're thinking about behavior to take the situation seriously. What is the entire situation that your clients are in when they make these important decisions? Then we designed and implemented an intervention. Implementation being, of course, the most important part, and then we evaluated and learned. So every program that I worked with had some way of collecting and analyzing data. Next slide. So let's look at the 2009 to 2010 innovation projects, and I'll be talking about the first two today. One with a campaign for working families, and one with Linda in Austin. And the third was a program with Bank On DC. And I won't have time to talk about that today, but I really encourage anyone interested in the subject to look at the CFED website where my white paper on this work is. And you can read all about the Bank On DC project there. Okay, next slide. So the idea for our first intervention, or my first intervention, came from very good research on reminders. And when we think about the way people make decisions and their motivation to change their behavior, we often think that they are perfectly and consistently motivated. In fact, we have really limited attention. And because of that, these, what we can call attention shocks, are really important. Right? So someone has committed to do something, like set up an IDA, and make payments. And of course that's important. But then there's jobs and kids and movies and other things that suddenly become important. And so their limited attention gets very thin. And this desire to make the deposit goes to the back of the head. And what an intentional shot can do, essentially a reminder, is bring that idea back up to the front of the brain. Okay, so next slide. So what was really interesting is some researchers tried this with savings. This was in Bolivia, Peru, and Philippines. And they took very low-income folks, and they asked them to save. And they took some of them and either, just said, how much do you want to save? Great, go ahead and do it. And then they took some of them and they said, you want to save? Okay, great. What are you saving for? Okay, great. What's your phone number? Okay, great. And now we're going to send you text reminders right before that deposit is due to reach your savings goal. And what they found is that clients receiving these monthly reminders saved 6% more. Moreover, the clients who received a reminder with a specific savings goal saved 16% more than those receiving no text message at all. Reminders that didn't have a specific savings goal had no impact. So the way to think about this is that there's lots of ways to send reminders, and reminders are important. But the more targeted and the more finely tuned your reminders are, the more impactful they will be. So let's go to the next slide, and we can talk about how to make them more powerful. What they found is that they tried all these different ways to remind people. Some were very complicated. They went into sort of long dialogues about why it's important to save and what they wanted. That wasn't that successful. They sent puzzle pieces to people, and each puzzle piece represented part of their savings goal, or a picture of their savings goal. When they put the whole puzzle piece together, it would, their whole savings goal would appear. And, that had some impact, but it wasn't as impactful as just being very specific about what the person was saving for. And so if the person was saving for a new roof, for example, sending a text reminder that said, remember to reach your savings goal so you can buy a new roof, very specific, was really successful. Also focusing on the means, right? Remember to make your deposit this month at the bank. It's not just save for these goals because you can do it and anything is possible. It's literally, how are you going to make this happen? You need to go to the bank on Tuesday. They also looked at multiple goals, so lots of times people are saving for a couple of different things, and they found that just focusing on one of those goals is the best. Keep it simple. We talked about that a little bit already. And that timing matters. Sending these text reminders right before that deposit is due is very helpful. And the reason for that, next slide, is that timing matters more than we think it would. And this is an example of that. So this is a website called Google Trends, and it allows you to see what people are Googling. You can see what they're Googling any month, any year, or over years. You can see what they're Googling in the U.S. You can see what they're Googling in Afghanistan. You can see what they're Googling in the U.S. versus Afghanistan. It's actually an incredibly powerful and, for me, addictive tool. So this is Weight Watchers, and what we're looking at is when people Google Weight Watchers in the U.S. And what you see is a very clear timing pattern, right? So we have from 2004 to 2009, and this big line in the middle of each of these years, where you see the spike, is January. So what we see happening, which we probably all intuitively could guess, is that right around New Year's, when people are making their New Year's resolutions, they're Googling Weight Watchers. Next slide. And we see the same thing when we look at how to save money. It's a little bit less powerful here, right? But what you can see is a slight, well, we see two things, right? One is that there's this, significant trend over time where people want to save more from 2005 to 2011. They're looking more at how to save. And what you see is a little dip each year, right before January during the holidays when people are spending and not really thinking about how to save money. And then this little spike around January after the holidays when they're thinking about how to save money. And what this tells us is that people's interest and motivation is not consistent over time. There is, in fact, these incredibly powerful attentional windows when at some point someone's desire for something that they might desire in some way at all times really opens up, and they're much more likely to take in new information and potentially to act and change their behaviors. Next slide. And so I took these 2 points and these 2 good pieces of research to help CWF think about how they could help their low-income, self-employed folks prepare for tax time. And so this is sort of a complicated slide, but let me take you through it. So this is one of our innovation programs, and I work with Megan Kiesel at the Center for Working Families. And she was interested in how to get low-income, self-employed folks to get prepared for their tax appointments. And the reason it's so important, especially for low-income folks, to be prepared for tax time is because if you are self-employed, the more you can document that you've spent on your business, the more you can get in refunds. And so it's really critical. What was happening, you see this gold guy, he represents their clients. And then each of those puzzle pieces represent something that they need to do in order to get to that big stage at the end, which is the goal, which is increased tax refunds. So the first thing they need to do is prepare for tax day. And so what CWF would do was encourage them and educate them. Everybody had to go to an intro meeting. The next step is that clients would prepare. The slide that you see is where they were losing people. It's a big hassle to I'm self-employed. It's a big hassle to remember all of your receipts, to collect them all at all times, to look up information that you're afraid that you've forgotten. It's stressful. It's time-intensive. The next thing that is supposed to happen is that clients have done all that. They're prepared for tax day. So what we did is we built this bridge over the slide by making a plan and sending reminders. Next slide. And one of the things that I wanted to do is test this assumption that, in fact, it made a difference to be prepared for tax day. And what we saw, this is at Linda's tax site actually, is that being prepared did make a significant difference. So you see this very tight correlation between the average refund ranging from 0 to 2,000 and being prepared. Okay, next slide. So knowing that it mattered, we knew even more that it was really important to get these clients to prepare. So what we did is at the workshops that the low-income clients had to go to before they got their taxes done, we randomized each. So some went through the regular workshop, and some went through our treatment workshop. And at that treatment workshop, everybody got a little sheet that looked like this. And they had to say, after they learned all about how to prepare, okay, when is your follow-up appointment? When is your tax day? What are the 3 things you're going to do to prepare? And there was an Excel spreadsheet that if they had filled out, they would be very prepared for that day. So one was to complete this Excel sheet. Everybody had to put that on. And then the other 2 things were things that they had to think about what they were going to do to prepare. And then we folded that up. They left that with us. And we sent it back to them about a week before their appointment. Next slide. And so when we sent it back to them, that was essentially working as a reminder to them. What we see, and these are the results, is that those in the treatment group averaged refunds about $1,800. Those in the control group averaged refunds about $240. So you see a difference of those who went through this treatment, thinking about what they were going to do, and then getting that reminder, and getting that reminder at a time, right, when their attentional window is probably very open because they're preparing for their tax day about a week before, or thinking about their tax day about a week before. is that they, people who went through this process got about $1,600 more in tax refunds. And so this is really exciting research. I always want to say when I talk about this that the number here is only 41 clients, and so it's small. So what that means is that this is not research that we should say every tax site in the world should do this, we know this works. This is research that says there's huge potential here that should be replicated so we can make sure that it actually works. Next slide. So we use similar ideas with Linda at Foundation Communities. And you see what they were trying to do is to get their clients to sign up for business classes. And we thought that if they did sign up for these business classes, they would reach this goal, this stage at the end, where they would have increased business capacity and income. And you can see the slide here. People weren't signing up. We think they were depleted, overloaded. Depleted meaning basically they were stressed out. And we thought, okay, maybe we can help that by sending them reminders. Next slide. And specifically, we thought we would send them reminders right after they got their tax refund. The thought here is that maybe when you're low income, there's so much stress in your life that it's hard to think about climbing out of poverty by starting an IDA program or signing up for a business class. But maybe, this is the hypothesis, when you get your tax refund, you're suddenly rich, relatively rich for a moment. And in that moment, some of that stress goes away, and you can think about signing up for classes and taking on some of these extra asset building activities. So what we did is we randomized different groups, and some groups just got general information about these business classes. Some got the information plus a letter telling them about, reminding them about these business classes. And some got the general information, a letter, and a postcard. So they get 2 reminders. And then I should say just very briefly, with the general information and a letter, those groups were sub-randomized so that some got it right after their tax refund, because we wanted to see if people did experience this temporary moment of richness where they could think about different things. Next slide. So in terms of impact, what we found is that these letters, reminders, in general, did seem to make a difference. And they increased interest and enrollment for some filers. So what we were looking at was not only did people who get the letters call to say they were interested, intention, we were also interested in action. Did those people who called to say they were interested actually follow up and take the class? And what we saw is that in general, the letters did seem to help for some filers. We didn't see any evidence of this reset moment, of this richness moment, where there was any difference between the people who had just received the refund. Were those people more likely to sign up? We didn't see that. We also saw that those additional postcards didn't seem to make a difference. And so our overall lesson for me is that the results were ambiguous. It seemed to make a difference for some filers, but not others. This reset moment didn't seem to exist, and the additional postcard didn't seem to make a difference. And one thing I want to say about these results is that it's great. It's totally fine that our hypothesis wasn't proven. That's going to happen sometimes when you try out new things. You're going to find out that it doesn't work. And maybe that means you have to try it again in a different way. Maybe that means that your hypothesis was just wrong. And I think that sometimes people are afraid to try new things and to test it rigorously because they're afraid that they're going to be proven that this idea doesn't work. And I think that that's great. If you can figure out that a bad idea is a bad idea, then that's one less thing to try, and you've made a difference in the field because you can tell other people that something doesn't work, and you shouldn't be afraid to try something because of that. So in terms of the implementation, I thought a lot about, was this the right intervention point? Were there different points where we could have given people the information about signing up for business classes? We talked about this attentional window. Tax time can be a really stressful time for people. They're thinking about a lot of different things. could there be another time where this attentional window is open? Next, in terms of our actual intervention, were there easier ways to go about this? We were sending these letters, these postcards. It was very expensive. It took a lot of time. Was there a different way to do this? And in this particular instance, I wonder a lot about a high-capacity site, if there's a way, at the site to hand people information, right after you give them their refund amount. You give them information about this business class. There's no postcards, there's no letters, you don't have to worry about any of that, everything's done at site. And so when you're thinking about these different intervention ideas, I think it's really important to think about the ease of implementation and the intervention point. Where does it make the most sense in terms of impact, and where does it make the most sense in terms of ease of implementation for the staff? Next slide.
And I believe we've come to the end of Mindy's presentation. Thank you so much, Mindy. Before we move on to Linda's presentation, we just wanted to point out that you can learn more about Mindy's Innovation Year by downloading her white paper, Applying Behavioral Research to Asset Building Initiatives, Lessons from a Year of Experimentation. You can find that by searching on CFED's homepage in the search field, which is located at www.cfed.org. And then just one other thing, next slide. If you run an IDA program, we want to let you know that there is a paper that Mindy prepared for a recent Assets for Independence Resource Center webinar that we did, that we mentioned before, that really looks at how you can improve the effectiveness of IDA programs through these strategies, and it has this great checklist. So we wanted to just point that out for you as well and give you the link here. And without further delay, I'll turn it over to Linda. Next slide.
Thanks, Kim. I just want to share with everyone initially about what an amazing experience it was in working with Mindy. I learned a ton, and of course any day that in which we're able to learn something new is a good day. To me, human behavior is really fascinating, and as Mindy had explained, none of us is Spock, all of us are Homer. We all know what we should do. We're supposed to eat more vegetables and exercise more and save more, spend less, drink less, use less water, at least here in Central Texas because we're still in a drought. But with that said, my point being that as I'm talking to you today about the interventions that we conducted, when I refer to our clients, I could just as easily substitute the word I, because these principles really do apply to all of us in every moment of our day. So we could go to the first slide. If you decide that you want to implement a behavioral intervention, it's really important to spend time on identifying your goal. You will be devoting a lot of your staff and financial resources to working on this project, so you want to make sure that you have a worthy goal. Where are the gaps in your service? Maybe there are no gaps, but perhaps you want to increase the uptake of your current services. Or maybe you want to roll out a new product or a new service. Once you identify your goal and what it is you want to work towards, what are the impediments to reaching it? How are you able to reduce that hassle factor that Mindy was explaining to us? It's also really important that your goal be measurable. We all have to report to someone. That could be our funder, it could be our government, our board of directors, our shareholders, or just our supervisor. And we all are really good stewards of the limited resources we have, so we want to make sure that we're able to report on the results that we reach in any sort of experiment or an intervention that we try to do, so that I can say, you know, those 2 hours that I spent every day on XYZ resulted in this happening. Another point to consider when you're identifying your goal is whether the potential payback is worth the resources that are required to achieve that goal. Next slide. So this slide enumerates a few of those resources that you also should take into consideration. Obviously, it's going to require some committed and skilled staff. My opinion is that it's really unfair to rely on volunteers on an intervention. Our volunteers are fabulous, and they do amazing work for us. But I can't recommend asking them to work on an intervention. If you really want measurable results, it's important to have skilled and committed staff that are able to devote some time to this. There's a phrase about junk in and junk out. So while it may not all be junk, you really want to have accurate information to rely on. Obviously, this is going to take you some time, and the time that you spend planning how you're going to conduct your intervention is almost more important than the time spent actually carrying it out. To be able to incorporate these tasks in your current operations, you really want to make sure that all your processes are nailed down in advance. And, you know, if you're anything like me, it always seems to take longer than what I think it's going to take. So I also recommend that you over budget your time allotment. Some interventions may not require an outlay of money, but of course for all of us time is money. One of our interventions, one that Mindy mentioned, was built around a direct mailing, which our program budget didn't include. We were really fortunate to have a university fund this for us, but I do want to mention this because if you decide that you're going to try to implement a study that is going to require some money, you need to make sure that part of your planning includes getting the funds for the implementation. And then, of course, you have to remain flexible. Mindy already mentioned this as well, that not every great idea is going to work. This was one of the harder lessons for me because I'm of the mindset that if I work hard enough and sweat enough and cry over it enough, eventually it's going to be successful. Clearly that's not the case with behavior, and I think it's really important to appreciate lessons learned, that in fact there is no failure. The next slide, please. When we were thinking about our goals and what we wanted to work on with Mindy, I realized that many of our self-employed clients are struggling, not only with taxes, but just in their general business sense. We have great classes. We know that they are a huge help to the clients who attend them, but our attendance rate was relatively abysmal. And so I really wanted to try to figure out a way to increase the participation. Mindy did explain what we did here. The letters and postcards that we mailed out asked folks to call me. I then tracked who called when and in response to which mailing. And the the lessons that we learned here are listed. We discovered that during tax preparation, clients really learn how much they don't know. So they are more motivated at that point to attend a class. Letters are good, but they are pricey. And Personally, I think the reason that the postcards didn't work so well is because probably they are trashed. I know myself, when I pick up mail and there's a postcard stuck in there somewhere, I'm less inclined to read it than to open a letter. And then we learned, the point was just emphasized to us that clients, well, all of us really do need lots of encouragement, reminders, and even subtle steering. Also, peer pressure helps. The next slide talks about the second intervention we worked on, which we conducted in an effort to help our clients better prepare before they came in for their taxes being prepared. Our self-employed clients were randomly selected for a treatment group or a non-treatment group. I developed a worksheet that all of our self-employed clients are asked to complete before they come in for tax preparation, and on that sheet they list their business income and expenses. So for the treatment group, when we were scheduling appointments, we went over that sheet in a whole lot of detail, answered any questions, we explained mileage and other deductible expenses and so forth. For the non-treatment group, we simply scheduled their appointment and told them to complete the sheet. Our results were somewhat less than scientific because we did rely to some extent on the subjective opinions of volunteers. But that aside, there really was no significant difference between the treatment and non-treatment groups, which simply told us that clients need more help than what can be provided in a phone call. The preparation level is consistently inconsistent. But this did lead us to the conclusion that we needed to incorporate our self-employed project into our coaching program so that clients could meet one-on-one with coaches to work through some of these issues and to develop a record-keeping system and learn what expenses were deductible and so forth. It was quite noteworthy that those who did come in better prepared received significantly larger refunds than those who were not prepared. Also, we learned how important it is to have really useful, simple, and accessible tools for our clients, because we do ask them to take on so many different jobs, which can be overwhelming, clearly. Next slide. Highlighted here are just some other lessons learned in the process of carrying out these two interventions. Getting clients to participate in our services is not easy. We spend a lot of time determining our message and the delivery system that will motivate our clients. But the paradigm shift here for me was learning that our messages, we need to develop messages that appeal to our clients, not what makes us as a staff feel good or what we think is going to be motivating. We really need to explore more and more ways to decrease that hassle factor, decrease the wait time, and focus on the positives for our clients. Peer comparison is a great motivator, so we were able to change some of our messaging rather than just saying, oh, our classes are great, make sure you come. It was much more motivating to explain, you know what, your neighbor who came in and was better prepared for their tax time was able to increase their refund threefold. I think I am a little bit over my time. We want to make sure we leave some time for Q&A. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Linda. So I do have a few questions that have come in, and I encourage people to continue to go to the part of this webinar infrastructure that allows you to ask questions. So the first one I have is for Linda, and this is a very basic but good question, which is, how was the design on the postcards? Was it eye-catching? And how was that a grabber for people?
Well, of course, we thought it was eye-catching, but apparently our clients didn't find it to be so eye-catching because our class attendance did not increase based on response to the postcards. I'm not sure.
Can I add something, Linda?
Sure, please.
Well, I was just going to say two things. You can actually see a copy of the postcard on the white paper, which is on the CFED website. I think it's on page 12. And I think something to think about when we think about the impact of the postcard is that what we're saying is not that the postcard had no effect, the postcard itself, because nobody only got a postcard. What we're saying is that the postcard had no additional effect in addition to the letter. Does that make sense? So the letter we did see had some effect, and then some people got a letter and a postcard. And we didn't see a marginal increase from the postcard. We just saw the same increase that people that got the letter got.
And we have a number of questions, I think, that are going to get to what really helped. So here's another one for Linda. Have you used the finding that those who are better prepared received larger refunds to help other clients, after the fact, who weren't part of the study, to come in better prepared, and how have you built that into your program, if at all?
We changed our messaging in terms of for our marketing materials. This past filing season, I haven't tracked response rates. We weren't able to do a scientific tracking, if you will. So I can't really say definitively what impact that shift in messaging made, but that's how we incorporated it, was just in terms of tweaking our marketing materials.
Okay, great. So this is a question for Mindy, and this goes back to the Foundation Communities Project. How large was the sample size in the study?
For Foundation Communities, I think it was about 2,900 total.
That's correct.
And so we divided that between the multiple treatment groups. So each group was probably around 400 or 500.
Great. And was any research to apply behavioral change communication, studying different methods to the group to gauge impact? Not sure what that is asking.
Yeah. Well, let me rephrase it, because I think this is what they're asking, which is a good question. We said, do reminders matter? But I think this question is saying, does the text, does the content of that reminder matter? Do the different messages you send matter? And we didn't test that, and I think that's a fantastic test. If you have a big enough client pool where you could, test 3 different messages and see what the differential impacts are, I think that would be fascinating. And for some reason, when we were working with Linda, we just didn't think about the very 1.0. We didn't think about text message or email. And doing these different messages is really much easier if you're going to use a text message or email, right? Because you can do it all for free.
Mm-hmm.
So following up on both of these questions, and either one of you could answer this, is a question: in lieu of the postcard, would a follow-up call work better? And what about the effectiveness of text messaging versus letters, which you'd already sort of begun to address?
I'll speak first, if that's okay, Mindy. Oh, go ahead, because I just lost my train of thought. Apologies.
Okay. Okay. You know, again,
I remember when I did make a bunch of follow-up phone calls. That's what I was going to say. For everyone who called in response to the letter, I then called and/or sent emails as a reminder of the classes. And I don't know that that made a significant difference.
Yeah, that part we must have done rigorously.
And so what about the effectiveness of text messaging versus letters?
So from my perspective, the big answer is we don't know because it hasn't been tested. And so I think that one of the reasons I really like doing these webinars is because practitioners ask these really fantastic questions. And unfortunately, a lot of the time, the answer is, I don't know. But the only way to find out is to have practitioners like you test it. Right now, I'm working with CFED on an IVA program, and we actually have brought on a text message service, and we are text messaging reminders for people to make their IDA deposits. I think this is just my hunch, my intuition. I think text messages will be more successful than letters. I think people are more likely to read a text message than open what could be junk mail. I don't know. But I do know from the implementation side so far, it's definitely cheaper, and it seems to be much easier. And if there's time on this call and people are interested, I can tell you a little bit about some of these text message services.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit to the other project, Mindy, that you raised first, which is around how you measured preparedness. How would you say you did that for the CWF project?
So this is a great question. We, in the design of this study, we had two ways to measure this. One was we were actually asking the tax preparers to, after each client had gone through, to do sort of what Linda's site did and say how prepared they were from 0 to 4. And you know, it's still subjective, although we did ask them to use this Excel spreadsheet that everyone was supposed to have as an objective measure. Did they fill out that spreadsheet? Did they have it? How complete was it? And then the other measure we had was not of preparedness itself, but of refund amount. And we had, you know, the exact amounts that everybody was refunded. And what happened, ideally in this study, we would have had both the preparedness measure, right, from the measures from the tax preparers who were telling us how prepared they were, and the amount they got back. And both of those, we would have a really nice study. What happened implementation-wise, as anyone who works at tax time knows, is that it's a crazy time, and the tax preparers got really busy, and we got really unreliable data. So it just had a lot of holes in it. Not everybody was filling it out. Not everybody was telling us how prepared people were. You know, not everyone was using the one objective measure that we had. They fill out this spreadsheet. So we couldn't use that measure. And so you see in my research, there is no measure of, you know, how actually prepared people were. What we have is what their refund amount was. And so what we did is we ran the data every way possible to see if there was anything else about these people that could explain the refund amount. And we found no other explanation. These people were the same in every single other way. The only difference was that some had gone through the treatment and some had not. But again, that's why when I talk about that particular study, I mention the need to replicate it.
Okay, well that is wonderful. We have so many questions coming in right now. I'm just going to try to move us forward. So, and this could be
both of our interventions as well, it was totally random who was in treatment and who was non-treatment.
Yeah,
Right.
I will say for Linda's, we had more statistical controls, so we had an Excel spreadsheet, and we actually used a statistical program to randomize them.
Okay, and so going back to Linda, what kind of useful and accessible tools did you offer the clients who were overwhelmed by those multiple hats they had to wear, CEO, CFO, accountant, et cetera?
I developed a toolkit that is very basic, but it includes things like a mileage log that folks can carry around with them in their car or truck. It has monthly, it has an envelope in it to stick your receipts in. It has monthly dividers so that every 2 weeks or so you can pull out your receipts and track your expenses and income for that month. Just has a lot of very basic tools. And I think I've gotten good feedback on it. I think that has been very beneficial for our self-employed clients. We have a lot of our
Are you still there, Linda?
I'm here. Can you not hear me?
I think I missed the last little bit of that. You said a lot of our...
Oh, a lot of our clients are not, are not even aware that they are self-employed or are running a small business. And so just explaining that to them and the items that they need to keep track of and how to track those, the income and the expenses is a huge benefit for them.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to the text messaging, because we've got several questions about that, I'm just going to batch a couple of them. So what system do you use for text messaging, and are there any special forms or documents to be signed in order to protect the privacy of clients who are receiving the text messages?
So the system that we're using now is called Tell My Cell, and you can just look up tellmycell.com. And actually, a link to that is on that IDA checklist.
Great.
And you know, this system, so Tell My Cell, is just a platform for you to use. It's not like anybody's seeing that data. And so I don't think you need a sign-off from clients because you're really the only one seeing their personal information.
So here's another question, Mindy. We work with a lot of survivors of domestic violence who have a hard time gathering their documents together for tax time for a variety of reasons. Do you think this might be a good group to test a number of different treatments?
Yeah, I think it would be a fantastic group to test some things with. I have to say I don't know a lot about that population, so my first instinct would be to find out more about their situation, their fears. You know, if you're thinking about text messages, is that something that they feel comfortable, you know, getting text messages? They wouldn't feel like that was an invasion of privacy as long as this group is a really trusted group. You know, that sounds really promising. So my first instinct might be to do a focus group with some of that population and have a conversation with them about what's the best way to reach them, what sort of messages in reminders they think would be the most powerful.
Mindy, where can we find more information about attentional windows and behavioral economics?
So it's a great question. Attentional windows is actually a term that I made up. So let me answer the last question as I think about some papers that you can look at for that. But if you go to, again, the CFED website, and there's a search bar, and you can look at behavioral, just type in behavioral economics, and you'll find a page that has a link to a page called Behavioral Economics in the Real World. And if you click on that, on the right-hand side, there is a link to resources. and I can give you a few now, but definitely look there because there's tons. I put up, with CFED, we put up videos and academic papers and popular press papers. So I would look at the Nudge blog, which is, I think at this point it's nudge.org. I think they actually changed it. And the Situationalist, I think, is fantastic. They have more academic work. That's like the situation, and then ILIST, the Situationalist. I think those are two really good places to start. You can also look at, so I think this is a good resource. It's a little academic, but Daniel Kahneman is thought to be sort of the godfather of behavioral economics, and his work on loss aversion is really foundational. And so you can look up Daniel Kahneman and find some of his papers. And he actually has a new book out that has sort of a more in-depth way of thinking about not only, do people think like Homer and not Spock, but we think like Homer and not Spock specifically at certain times when we're stressed out. And you can think of poverty as a very stressful situation. And so his book looks at when we're most likely to act like Homer and why. And that's called Thinking Fast and Slow. And that's his new book. And I actually really recommend anybody that wants to think about this stuff in depth to get that.
Great. Well, we are unfortunately at the end of our time. I think we've heard a lot today. There's a lot of great questions that we've addressed and some we didn't get to. So I definitely encourage people to contact Mindy and Linda directly to get any other questions answered. But I will say that the PowerPoint presentation and links to a lot of the resources that we mentioned on the call will be available on CFED's website. And for those of you who participated in the call, we will be sending out a link to that, so it makes it super easy for you to get there. And I just wanted to thank everyone for joining us and give a special thanks to Mindy and to Linda for such great presentations and getting us focused not just on what happened already around behavioral economics, but where we can go in the future, because I heard a lot of things that we can all follow up on should there be an interest and a way.